The purpose of this brief video is to demonstrate that RC components such as electronic speed controllers, servos, and even brushless motors can be operated fully underwater if properly conditioned. So during this test, I'm going to use a small servo controller from eSky. It's a 2-channel unit, so I'll be using it to control a old Futaba servo as well as a mystery 200 amp controller. In a previous post, I discussed exactly how I had mounted this thing with a fan onto the top of it. Of course, it's going to be fully submerged in my aquarium. So I've removed the fan, not that the fan would have a problem, except when it's running, the drag would probably burn up the motor. So that simply is removed. The power then comes from a small battery pack. I will power the brushless motors in and the speed controller by two 5,000 milliamp hour 2-cell batteries, giving me a total of about 14 volts. And I'll be using some new brushless motors. These I actually plan to operate in a dual system underwater. My first demonstration will deal with a Futaba servo, again hooked up to my little eSky servo eliminator. You can see as I turn this eSky, I can turn the servo so you can adequately see the movement. Now I have conditioned this with Corrosion X, and what I'll do now is to drop this servo into the water, fully submerged, and with my camera relatively close up, you can see the operation of the servo. Now what I'm going to do is leave this in here for maybe 4, 5, 6 hours completely submerged as we continue with the rest of the test. In this second demonstration, I've taken the second channel of the eSky servo eliminator and now attached it to my mystery 200 amp ESC, again conditioned in Corrosion X and previously conformal coated. It is mounted then in a small Tupperware container, the original heatsink on, 4 screws with a plate on the bottom allow the heatsink to conduct the FETs. And that in turn is hooked to one of my motors. I don't want to splash all over the place, so I simply have a red tape on there. So again, I'll try to minimize my speed on this thing. So that'll give you an idea of the operation. Now if you look also closely, you can see my servo moving at the same time. So what I'll do is I'll take my speed controller and drop it in the water, but I only have one hand, so you have to bear with me. Well, welcome to the real world. The test was a failure, and the reason, and it was my stupidity, is I filled the tank with water from the tap. We have an old house, and there's sufficient amount of iron and ions in there, so it is conductive and not non-conductive. It's not as bad as salt water, but it certainly isn't distilled water. So the high voltage coming in here of the ESC, there was a small internal short, and the ESC went out. But being in water, it at least didn't cause any major damage. So if you're using the ESC in water, make sure it's distilled, or better yet, make sure that it's in a non-conductive mineral oil just to be safe. So we've lost an ESC, but now I know that we have heavy amount of ions and conductivity on the tap water in my house. My servo has been submerged for several hours now, so just to conclude this rather expensive test on my stupidity, I'll turn the eSky again, and you can see that the servo at least is still operation. This is low voltage, so even in the slightly conductive water from the tap in my house, we still have operation. End of test.